Tonight, both from Beth Am Women. I'd like to invite Joanne Donsky and Jennifer Frankl to share their words of Torah.
Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion includes several passages commanding us to help those in need and to remember that God has helped us to get where we are, that we didn't get here simply by our own efforts, and that it's a mitzvah to help others. Here are the passages. You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow countryman or stranger. You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger or the fatherless. When you reap the harvest in your fields and overlook a sheaf, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. I'm Joanne Donsky. Jennifer Frankl and I are speaking this evening on behalf of Beth Am Women. In keeping with this week's Torah portion, we're excited to tell you about Learning Home Volunteers, a wonderful program that Beth Am Women is engaged in to help very young children in low-income families. In fact, Learning Home Volunteers is emblematic of the wonderful things that Beth Am Women does, introducing women to and offering ways of becoming involved in important tzedakah activities in the community that make a real difference in people's lives. I remember being on a plane a number of years ago and reading a really disturbing article about the vast difference between the number of words that low-income and high-income young children have when they enter kindergarten. And the really negative impact that has on them as they grow up, as they go through school and grow up. What I didn't know then was that lower income children start kindergarten 18 months or more behind their higher income peers. And that difference, it's really hard for them to catch up. And so the difference sometimes gets bigger and bigger as they go through school. And what I thought about was, and what really bothered me, was to think of how hard it must be for these little children to get further and further behind. How discouraged they must feel, and what a difference it makes in their lives as they go through school, and as unfortunately many of them drop out of school. Around that time, Beth Am had embarked upon an exciting effort to give lower income children an equal start as they entered kindergarten. It was through Beth Am's Equal Start initiative that I learned about Learning Home Volunteers, and I've been involved with it since shortly before the program began. Equal Start, others at Beth Am and I have spread the word about Learning Home Volunteers, and now there are a number of Beth Am women who are volunteering at Learning Home Volunteers, as well as other members of Beth Am. And we are as delighted, and I think we're all really delighted with what we've done at Learning Home Volunteers and with what Learning Home Volunteers has done. I have been so impressed with Learning Home Volunteers. Their goal is to empower, equip, and connect low-income families so that they can prepare their children to enter kindergarten at the same level as higher-income children. I started volunteering with Learning Home Volunteers before COVID hit. At that point, the plan was to train parents and volunteers as a team to work with the children and to teach them and get them ready for school. I love the idea of empowering parents to teach the children. As a new mother, I hadn't completely understood the value of reading to and playing with an infant and toddler. I was surprised when a good friend who was a PhD in infant development wanted to give a toy and book shower for my infant son. I wondered, what on earth is a little baby boy going to be doing with books and toys? But I learned through this friend that babies and very young children learn so much from our reading and playing with them and talking to them all the time we're doing it. So it wasn't surprising to me that lower income parents who are so busy with some with multiple jobs and with many children were likely not to be aware of the importance of their role in teaching their young children. And certainly, they didn't have the resources that I had to have a lot of books and toys around the house for my son. So one of the things that I loved about Learning Home Volunteers, that they planned to empower parents to teach their children by playing and reading with them. They would train parents and volunteers to work as a team in preparing their children for the young children for kindergarten. I was paired with a family. The mom and I both went through training. We watched the videos that Learning Home Volunteers had prepared, really great videos. And then we came together with the executive director and a number of other moms and volunteers to go through a training session where we practiced new skills. We learned how to engage very young children in learning through open-ended play. I started going to the family's home once a week. First, I would stop by the Learning Home Volunteers office and I would choose all these toys and games that I thought the little girl would enjoy. And I would take them out to the home. And then we all, Mom and I call her my little girl, and I had lots of fun building with paper cups that had numbers and letters on them. And she would identify the letters and numbers on the cups. She'd play with the doctor's bag. She loved the puzzles. And it was amazing to see how she engaged in play and how excited she was to learn, not even realizing that she was learning. But then COVID hit. And that was a real problem, I thought. I didn't quite see how Learning Home Volunteers was going to continue. It wasn't safe to be going into other people's homes. But it did continue, and it became even stronger. Learning Home Volunteers' creative leadership pivoted quickly and created what turned out to be an even more exciting program. Learning Home Volunteers knew that the parents were the best teachers for their children, so they figured out how to make it easy to empower and equip the parents to take charge of playing with and teaching the children. They decided to create boxes of activities, full of activities, developed around a theme, and with 3 books that children aged 2 to 5 would enjoy. These boxes were then created by volunteers and delivered to each child's home every 2 weeks. The parents had already been trained, so they were ready to go. And I'm going to turn it over now to Jennifer, who's been involved since this time and who's been working on developing the activities.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Jennifer Frankl, and I've had the privilege of raising 3 children here in the Beth Am community. The Jewish community takes pride in our education and the education of our children. As a parent, I spent many hours reading, writing, doing art, taking my children to museums, to the zoo, and sharing my absolute love of books. After all, we're the people of the book, and here we can share this love of books and reading with our children. Unfortunately, it is very clear that not all children share in the wealth of educational resources that our children enjoy. The U.S. Department of Education research finds that 2/3 of low-income houses have no books for their children. And you would think, in light of that, their access to libraries and libraries in their schools and the community would be higher because we need these children to have books, but instead, their access to books is even lower. There are fewer libraries and fewer books in those libraries in poorer communities. These kinds of differences in access have lifelong impacts on the literacy, success in school, and ultimately access to jobs that these children can enjoy. Programs put on by Beth Am's Equal Start and Racial Justice and Equity Committees, as well as my personal drive to put my actions behind my beliefs, led me to contact Learning Home volunteers. As a matter of fact, the first person I spoke to was Joanne. Since I started volunteering during COVID, I have focused most of my efforts on the equip part of the Learning Home Volunteers program. Given my love of books, I was promptly given the job of librarian, sorting the many donated books so that Learning Home volunteers can find the appropriate books to put in every child's box. In addition, I've helped plan and gather materials for the Learning Home volunteer families. When families first join Learning Home volunteers, they're given a teacher's kit. The teacher's kit provides materials like crayons, papers, scissors, and glue, the kinds of materials that make the simplest learning activities possible, and that you probably find in every drawer in every household here, but most of these families don't have. Then, as Joanne discussed, Learning Home volunteers picks a theme with an appeal to 2 to 5-year-olds every 2 weeks. Themes like farm, ocean, trains, pirates, and chooses books, songs, and activities that the children can do around that theme. In addition to working with the theme, Learning Home volunteers make sure that the activities support kindergarten readiness, so every lesson includes materials that help children learn their letters and numbers, colors and shapes, kindergarten readiness social skills like sharing and taking turns. They help build fine motor skills, and most importantly, they spark a lifelong love of learning. Volunteers like me then make and package those learning materials, keeping in mind that the materials each month must be very low cost to ensure that the program makes the most efficient use of limited resources. Some examples of materials have included cardboard boxes and stickers to make your own city or your own machine, dinosaur play sets with cardboard to make background diorama settings, manipulatives with numbers and letters like cards, cups, stamps, beads, you name it, ingredients for homemade Play-Doh or slime. In addition to the standard set of material, every child's box includes extras focused on that child's interest, books that they can keep, storyboards, games, puzzles. At the end of 3 years in the program, each family is expected to have close to 100 books in their home. On top of the equip part, Learning Home Volunteers uses ClassTag, a free web-based parent-teacher communication website app, to help with the connect part, even over COVID, or something that wasn't even available before COVID and that was put together during COVID and has really allowed these families to meet each other online and to share the activities. The Learning Home volunteers post a description of the activities, how to use them, the books read aloud in English, Spanish translations, and other relevant materials. And then the parents engage in the activities with their children. They film it, they post it, and they share with each other the cool things that they thought of that you can do with the kit. Despite all the retired preschool teachers that participate in this program, and designing these materials, their proudest moment is when the families post activities that they never dreamt of would be done with these kits and share it with each other, these new and wonderful things that the children have thought of to do with all of these materials. Another element of community building includes Bethlehem woman volunteer Barbara Pearson, who biweekly leads a circle time for families on Zoom with songs, stories, and games. The Learning Home Volunteers is a great opportunity for including your whole family in social justice activities. My mostly grown children and my 86-year-old mother have helped me put materials together. My mother was so delighted to have a chance to help children, even when she was stuck in the house with COVID restrictions. As you've heard from our talk, Learning Home Volunteers depends on a strong volunteer community, and its needs are expanding rapidly as Learning Home Volunteer extends its reach to more families. In addition, when Learning Home Volunteers is able to put volunteers back in homes, they want to start a new program called Tell Me a Story to support English language learning. Many of the families in this program do not speak English as a first language. English language skills are key to their children's kindergarten readiness. And so Learning Home Volunteers is putting together a brand new curriculum for volunteers to use to support English language acquisition during biweekly visits with Learning Home volunteers' families. Volunteers will bring a kit full of songs, books, and activities designed specifically to support English language learning. This will be a great opportunity for volunteers who love personal interaction. Now I'll invite Joanne to finish by telling us about a Beth on Women event to learn more about Learning Home Volunteers.
So next Tuesday evening, Learning Home Volunteers is the organization that's going to be featured at Beth on Women's annual Celebrate in the Garden. Celebrate in the Garden is one of our favorite events. It's a time that we can get together, and especially appreciated now that we haven't been able to get together. It's going to be outside on the patio over there, and will be well spaced. I want to invite all women to come to this event. Vicki Schumacher, the founder and CEO of Learning Home Volunteers, as well as a parent, will be speaking about how her family has been impacted by this wonderful program. Celebrate in the Garden is a great time to learn about this program and to get to see friends that you haven't seen in a while. It's going to be next Tuesday from 6 to 8. We'll have a little dinner too, a little one. And you can, but if you do want to come, I urge you to register by Sunday, day after tomorrow, because that's the deadline for registration. We also hope that you'll join Beth and Beth on Women in putting your time and talents to work in support of Learning Home Volunteers, or one of our many other social justice initiatives. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.